A public hearing of the Board of Trustees, Judson ISD, is called to order at 6:45 p.m. We'll take roll call. Mr. Salinas?
Present, sir.
Ms. Shaw?
Here.
Dr. Salinas?
Present.
Mr. Macias?
Present.
Mr. LaFoyle?
Present.
Mr. Flores?
Present.
I'm Steve Shire, Board President, and Dr. Montoya.
Present.
Go ahead.
Okay, again, this is a special public hearing that we have to have every year on the School Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. This is a requirement we have to do once a year, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Elizondo, our Chief Financial Officer, for the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. Good evening, everybody. As Dr. Montoya said, we're going to review some of the items that are presented through this first presentation. It is a requirement that we do this every year, and so we're going to get started, and I'll try to be brief. School First was adopted by the legislature in 2001, and it was a rating criteria, a rating system that they implemented to help school districts, board members, and communities be knowledgeable about how the school districts are doing when it comes to finances. And they developed certain criteria to kind of grade us on how well we do or not. And this particular system was based on, there are certain ratings, a superior rating, the above standard, meet standard, and substandard achievement. If you hit that last one, the substandard achievement, then they require that you do a corrective plan to TEA to see how you're going to correct the rating, because they don't want anybody to be in that category, obviously. Our school district fortunately earned the superior rating, which is a top rating for this particular rating system. There are, this year, 15 criteria that they analyzed to determine that we earned the superior rating. And the data that they're evaluating was from the 2014-15 school year. So they're always 2 years behind when we actually present the data. So like I said, there are 15 criteria. I'm not gonna read every word in here because it'll take forever, but just to kind of give you I'll give you the general idea of each one of them. The very first one they wanna know is, we have an audit report an audit that has to be conducted every year, and we have to file the report with the agency, and we have a certain number of days to do that with. And the question to this is, did we submit that report in time? And the answer is yes, we did. And they also want you to share with y'all what the answer was for the previous school year. So in this particular case, the answer is yes for both of those. We submitted it on time this year, we submitted it on time the year prior to that. For number two, it's asking, all right, in that financial audit report, when the auditors issue an opinion of the financial records, was the opinion a clean opinion? In other words, were they saying that all the numbers presented fairly the position of the school district? And it's called an unmodified opinion. And yes, we did receive an unmodified opinion, both this year and last year, and actually we've received an unmodified opinion for at least the last 20 years, consecutive years. So I'm gonna move on to the next one. This particular one asks if there were any instances where there was weaknesses in our controls in the systems that we have in place to detect any kind of fraud or anything like that. And they review all of our procedures, and they determined that there were no weaknesses. And the same situation occurred last year. This one asks about, was the school district in compliance in paying all of our debt payments? So every year we have to pay for our bonds that we have, as well as sometimes we'll get loans for buying buses, and typically those are really the two things we do. And the answer to this is yes, we did pay back all the debt payments, the principal and interest payments on time for all the bonds that we have outstanding, as well as any tax notes that we had outstanding as well. This particular question, number 4, is asking about, we have to make payments on a monthly basis to TRS, which is a retirement system that the school district belongs to, as well as to the Internal Revenue Service for taxes we withhold from our employees' paychecks, Texas Workforce Commission, reporting unemployment, and other government agencies. And the auditors go through and validate that we have in fact made all of our payments on time and no penalties were ever assessed because of any late filing. And they went through and reviewed it, and we have always filed them on time, so there was no issue there. Same thing for this particular one is a new indicator. Some of them you'll see that in parentheses there towards the end in bold, and those indicators they just added to this. There used to be 7 indicators last year, and this year they added 8, so now we're at 15. The next one, number 5, is just asking about our unrestricted net asset balance. And what they're trying to determine here is, in several of these questions, is do we have enough money on our balance sheet to cover our requirements for the school district? And that means we have enough to be able to require all of our expenditures, and again, all of our liabilities and bond payments and things like that we have to pay. And when they look through it to evaluate it, yes, we do have enough. So, of course, they said yes both years. Number 6 is a new indicator, and here they're wanting to know, do we have enough cash on hand between cash and investments to make sure that we have sufficient to cover our operating expenditures, to make sure that we don't have to borrow money to pay any of our bills on a monthly basis or any time throughout the year. And yes, we do have sufficient money. We have approximately 3 months worth of savings in our fund balance so that we can withstand any kind of shortfalls and any kind of cash flows that we might have. Number 7 asks about current assets to liabilities for the school district to cover short-term debt. This is when we owe things that are for, like the tax notes that we're going to pay on a yearly basis that are shorter. They're not usually longer than a year, and they wanted to look at our assets to make sure that we have enough cash on hand to pay for any liabilities that we have outstanding. And there are ratios that they use to see, okay, how much do you have? Do you have just a little bit over, or do you have a lot over? So our current ones, as it says a little further down, says that we're 1.9 times greater than our liability. So we're almost at a 2-to-1 ratio. So it's good. Number 8 is also a new indicator. The other one I talked about a minute ago was short-term. This one is for long-term. Just kind of looking a little bit longer in the curve. If you're looking at 5 years plus, do we still have enough assets to cover what we need? This particular one, there's 10 points that are possible to get in this particular category, and we received 6 points out of it. And when we, every year, or not every year, but when we go sell bonds, we always hire rating agencies like Fitch and Moody's to do an analysis of our financials. And one of the things that we have a very good rating with them, but one of the things they always share with us is that it's typical of what they call fast growth districts, which we're one of, to show that we have more debt than they would like to see. And that's why this is a 6 out of the 10, because we have a little more debt than they would like to see a district have our size. But again, typical for fast growth school districts. Number 9, did the school district's general fund revenues exceed expenditures? So again, they're just looking at, do you have enough cash on hand to pay for your expenses? And do our revenues, when you look at it for the entire year, did we actually have to go into our fund balance at the end of the year, or did we have a surplus? And they're looking at 60 days, and we have 92 days worth of cash on hand. So again, we did well there. Number 10 asks about the ratio of debt service to meet your debt service requirements. Again, a lot of this is based on it. They want to make sure that you definitely have enough money to pay your bonds, and we do have enough money to do that. We're at a 1.8 ratio, so more than enough. It's, again, almost a 2-to-1 ratio, our assets versus our liabilities. Number 11, administrative cost ratio. I know that some folks have asked about this in the past, and it asks, are we within the threshold that the state has in place for school districts our size? And so the threshold that they have in place says that a school district our size should be between 8.55% to 18.55%. And the way they calculate that is they look at all of our instructional expenditures and then look at just the expenses that we have for central office and the curriculum staff and say, okay, how does that compare? And so our school district is actually at 6.27%, which is, you can tell it's even below the lowest that they say you should be at. So we're doing really well there. Did the school district not have a 15% decline in student staff ratio over the past 3 years? So again, they're looking at how quickly your district is growing, and are you providing enough staff to address the needs of the school district as far as student growth is concerned. And while we did have a decline in the ratio, we did experience that during that same time period, a growth of about 1,200 students. So we're addressing the needs of our kids with a little bit less student to teacher ratio, and some of this has to do still with a carryover from 2011 where we had to release or eliminate some positions, and so it's still carrying forward a little bit. Now we're starting to see it catch up a little bit more as years have gone up a little bit, so that will improve a little bit more in the next year or two. Number 13 is the PEIMS data that we provided to TA, how did it compare to our annual financial report the auditors submit? So they want to make sure that when we're submitting data to the state, that it matches the audit report. So it's kind of a check and balance for them. And they grade you on, you can have a little bit of a variance and it'd be okay, but we had a 0 variance, which means that we were right on target. We reported exactly what they said on the audit report. Number 14 asks about, that AFR stands for Annual Financial Report. Were there any instances of non-compliance? So all the grants that we receive, and there's a lot of rules that come along with those grants, both state, local, federal regulations, and they want to know, did we comply with all those, or did we have any areas where we were not compliant? And they said, yes, we are compliant with all those, and that is a new indicator that came out this year. And number 15 talks about when school districts get overpaid by the state, typically because they contact them and tell them they're having financial hardships, and then the state has to eventually take that money back. So they're just asking, did we fall into that situation? Unfortunately, we are not in that situation. We have not needed them to adjust our payments because of any kind of financial hardship in the district. In addition to that, there's other information that also is presented to kind of help increase the knowledge to our taxpayers and our board members. And there's just a couple of slides about that, and then there'll be a little bit more after that. But this is just talking about the financial strength of the school district. It's talking about our fund balance, and specifically the general operating fund balance, just to kind of see where do we fall in our fund balances compared to our expenditures. The board adopted a policy that we should be no less than 17% in the general operating fund of our fund balance. And we're actually, for that year, we're actually at 28.58%. So again, well over what the minimum the board has established, and so it does give us a little bit of a cushion in case the board needs to do something. Tax collections, really important to us. Those other things that we talked about, we will definitely not have enough revenues to cover our expenditures and end up in the situation that we do financially if we were not doing a good job of collecting taxes. And of course, if our citizens, that's dependent on our citizens, all of our residents in the community, that they are really good about paying their taxes. And so we appreciate that. It makes it good for the whole school system. And so if you have kind of a trend that you see that the current collections are, that year we're at 98.5% total collections, because there you add the delinquent for the prior year, so it actually looks like you're above 100%, but that's because you're adding delinquents. So again, that's great. Our community is very supportive, and they do pay their taxes on time. Operating cost management kind of just shows you again by fiscal year down there, how did we do for our fund balance, the resulting our fund balance, and it just kind of shows you a little bit where is our fund balance ending every one of those years, like 11 through 15, as compared to our expenditures for each one of those years, and what does that mean as far as the change. So you'll see that very last number there was a 1.21% increase from the prior year, and in 15 we had a negative 0.97, which means that year we actually spent a little bit of fund balance. So our revenues versus expenditures were not, we didn't have sufficient revenues that year to cover our expenditures, so we went into fund balance a little bit. It wasn't very much, but we did go into it a little bit. Our administrative cost management, again, just kind of what we talked about a minute ago, for 15, the range the state has set for a district our size is between 8.55 to 18.55% administrative costs versus all other costs for the district, non-administrative costs. And so our ratio was 6.27, again, well below that minimum state one that's there. Beginning in 2007, there were some additional disclosures that the legislature adopted, said we also want you to share some other things with the board and the community. And so that's what I'm going to go through right now, just a few items here. One of the things that is available to the community, if you request it, is a copy of the contract we have for the superintendent. So if any of y'all would like a copy of that, if you'll just see me and request it, we'll definitely get you a copy of it. One of the things they also are asking is that we share with the board and the community by the superintendent and each individual board member what they expended from district funds throughout the year. So this one, while the other data I was sharing with you a minute ago was based on 2014-15 data, this particular data is based on 15-16, so it's a little bit more recent. It's last school year. And it has it broken down by category a little bit, as y'all can see, and it has a total at the bottom by each board member and the superintendent as to what they expended. The item that talks about other, and then it says registration and memberships, the board, our school district, as all school districts, are members of the Texas Association of School Boards. And the reason that row is a little bit higher than what maybe some folks would anticipate is because whatever fee they charge us for the year, we have to divide it by 8 people, so the board and the superintendent. So even the board members may look at it and say, well, I didn't spend that much there. Well, it's because it's a Texas Association of School Board fees that we have to allocate to each one of the board members and the superintendent. These are the others, the other districts, the other board members' names on there. And if any of y'all need a copy of this PowerPoint, well, actually, we put this PowerPoint on our website in the business services area. So by tomorrow, it'll be up there if anybody wants to look at it. There's another information that we also have to provide. Some school districts allow their superintendents or the superintendents work as consultants for other organizations, and we have to also let the board know about that and the community. In our case, our superintendent during fiscal year 15 did not work for any other organization while they were working for us. Any gifts that were given to board members that exceed $250 in the aggregate for the year, they have to report to us. And we had no reports submitted to us that had occurred. Transactions between board members and the school district. Y'all may be aware sometimes that you have a board member who also owns a business in the community. And the TA wants us to, or the state wants us to report that information to the community if that is happening. We currently do not have any board members that own businesses within the school district that we're doing transactions with. There are some other data that they keep adding to this every year a little bit more, and there's also some data some questions that they ask us to, again, determine the solvency of the school district. The other data you saw a little while ago is from 2 years ago. This is a little more current. This is actually from last year. Again, what they're trying to do is identify school districts that they're calling circling the drain. In other words, they're about to, going down and they're about to go down. So they're trying to identify those before that actually happens. So one of the questions they ask us is, what are your expenditures in the first quarter of your fiscal year, or what have you paid? And so these are for our school district in payroll and contracted services, and each one of these categories, these are the numbers that represent that. Again, this is going to be on our website tomorrow, so if anybody would like it, it's there. Also, within the last 2 years, they asked, did the school district have to borrow money to be able to operate within the September and December timeframe, or any other period within the 12 months? And the question for us is no, we did not have to borrow any money. And the little number 2 there, for the prior year, have a total general fund balance been less than 2% of expenditures. As I mentioned a minute ago, we were at 28-point-something% of expenditures, so no, we were not below that 2%. Did we declare financial exigency? That just means you had to tell people that you're poor, that you can't operate, and no, we didn't have to do that. How many superintendents has your school district had in the last 5 years? 2 is what our district has had. And how many business managers? And that's me, so 1 in the past 5 years. And then also provide, if you are having any issues, provide some comment about it so they can get an idea as to what's happening based on these ratios. And we didn't have to reply to this question because we were not in that situation. And that's it. Any questions or answers, I'll be happy to try to address.
Any questions? No. Mr. Zahn, as always, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
I can tell you, we got the best CFO
I don't know about that.
in
I
Texas,
appreciate your-
but I think we do. But thank you for what you do.
You bet.
This
Thank you.
meeting's adjourned, and give me a couple of minutes, and we'll come right back.